How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the FridgeCast. It is myself, Jake, with my good friend Death Row, and today we're going to be doing an interesting video topic, whatever you want to say. We're going to be talking about EA DICE and everything they've been doing and what they have done.
That's right. So I'll start off in the beginning. They basically started in 1992 as just DICE and created by a name that I'm not even going to try to pronounce because it is extremely foreign. And they did a few games here and there, nothing too big. We'll go through their catalog a little bit later. But then in 2000, DICE acquired Refraction Games, who were the developers of Codename Eagle, which I don't know if you've ever played.
I doubt it. I don't even, that doesn't ring a bell to me. So.
Yeah, but when they bought Codename, DICE inherited the rights to develop Battlefield 1942, which the Battlefield series is one of their two series that I would say everyone knows them for, and they basically just started creating them based on one acquisition, and it's happened ever since.
Literally every time.
Yep. And then in 2006, the next major thing in their company timeline was they were acquired by EA, and their name was then changed to EA DICE, which really isn't a change, but they've had a pretty straightforward company. I mean, made a small list of games, which we'll go over in a little while, to acquiring a company and starting Battlefield, and then it just kind of skyrocketed from there. And we'll start out by talking about their early life in the 90s, which I will talk about, because their first 5 games were only for the Amiga and the Amiga CD32. So it's an old retro console that almost no one knows about. Essentially, I shouldn't even say console. It's kind of like the Commodore 64 is what you're going to be able to associate it with. Kind of an early computer. Sense, yeah. Okay. So those 5 games were Pinball Dreams, Pinball Fantasies, Pinball Illusions, Benefactor, and Amnigold, something like that. I can't pronounce it, but I'm sure you discovered a theme that the majority of those were pinball related.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely.
And then I will go through the games leading up to the Battlefield acquisition. A couple more noticeable games. Start out with another follow-up to their hit series, True Pinball, S40 Racing, Motorhead, Swedish Touring Car Championship 1 and 2, Michelin Rally Masters. It seems like they went for a lot of racing games after pinball. NASCAR Heat, Diva Stars Mall Mania, which I vaguely have some recollection of existing. And then Shrek the Video Game is their first, what I would say, big name game.
On the Google reviews that I'm looking at here, they got 4.9 out of 5. That's kind of good.
Okay, apparently upon its release, Shrek was the 9th highest selling Xbox game for the month of November in 2001, selling 46,000 units, making up almost 3% of the console's overall revenue. So
fucking kidding me.
Apparently it was a relatively successful game. So I guess that was probably their first quote unquote hit. And then the 2 follow-up games were Rally Sport Challenge and Prism Chapter 1, The Dark Unicorn.
Don't know any of those, but sure.
None of those. Out of all those games, I've heard of 2. And then immediately after Prism, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. All of these pronunciations, by the way, I'm just assuming based on the sound out.
Some of them are hard.
Yes. After that was the acquisition. And their next game would be Battlefield 1942, which would be their first game into their big franchise. I believe Battlefield 1942 was exclusively for PC, was it not?
It was.
Okay, so yes, it was. So Battlefield came out to relatively high reviews, I believe, did it not? 9 out of 10 by Metacritic still to this day. And then after that, in the United States, Battlefield 1942 sold 680,000 copies and earned $27 million by August of 2006. Which for the time, that is quite popular. The game received quote unquote generally favorable reviews according to Metacritic. At the 6th annual Interactive Achievement Awards, Battlefield 1942 received awards for online gameplay, innovation, and PC gaming, PC Game of the Year, and Game of the Year. In March 2010, Battlefield was awarded the Swedish Game of the Decade award at the Computer Game Gala.
Those are high awards for sure.
Those are pretty high awards.
It definitely achieved a lot, yeah.
And then after that, they followed up with Shrek Extra Large. Shrek Extra Large is just a port to other consoles, maybe with some slight visual upgrades, it looks like. I don't see anything new. Following The Land Before Time Big Water Adventure, which is just a game based on Land Before Time movie series, I'm assuming. Followed by V8 Challenge, and then the first Battlefield expansion, Battlefield 1942 Road to Rome, followed by Midtown Madness 3, followed again by the next expansion, Secret Weapons of World War II.
I believe that was all the expansions.
That is all the expansions, yes. The next game they released at the beginning of 2004 was Battlefield Vietnam. So their first sequel 2 years later.
Just a couple of years later, yeah.
It's the follow-up, still PC exclusive. They haven't quite broken up into consoles yet. Seems to have relatively high reviews, 8.5 out of 10 on Metacritic still. But there's not much, honestly, information on this. Even the Wikipedia article is only like 3 paragraphs. The only claim to fame it seems to have is Battlefield Vietnam received a gold certification for, I'm not trying to pronounce that, indicating sales of at least 100,000 units across Germany, Switzerland, and Australia. Overall sales of Battlefield Vietnam had reached 990,000 by November of that year. By this time, the entire Battlefield series had sold 4.4 million copies. So
they started off very strong. In fact, stronger than I thought.
They started out pretty good. Like early on, they had some, standard Amiga PC console. I don't want to say bloatware, but let's be honest. Nowadays, that's what it is. It's bloatware. It's just,
especially with those pinball games, yeah.
Pinball and just all racing until Battlefield. And then their final game, Rally Sport Challenge 2 in 2004, before they follow up and start going all in on Battlefield. So 2005, Battlefield 2 is released. So that game was released, and to very high regards, it has a 9.3 on Metacritic. It would later, at its peak, be a 9.5. It received 5 stars out of 5 from Yahoo Games, GameSpy, XPlay, Computer Gaming World, PC Gamer, and stated its finely tuned maps and balanced gameplay prove that you can improve on perfection, and it was honored with Game of the Year. Battlefield 2 sold 1.2 million copies in its first month of release, and the total sales by July of 2006 were at 2.2 million. Followed later that year, they released 2 additional help me.
I'm not sure what it exactly is, because it's the same game. It's the same game, but in 2005, a bit later, in October of the 24th of October, they also came out with Battlefield 2 Modern Combat. As far as I can tell, this is just the port to the consoles at this point.
Yes.
And I think that's the slight name change. That's all it is. And yeah, because it's for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and 360 at that point.
And at the same time, they also released Battlefield 2 Special Forces, which I believe is just an upgraded version for Windows, but I could be horribly wrong.
By the way, this was my first Battlefield game. I got to Battlefield 2 Modern Combat. I had it on my PlayStation 2 at the time. I must have been like 9 or 10 years old when I first played it. It's a bit later. But I loved it. In the campaign, you're just switching from character to character. You weren't set as one character, so that was fun for
Yes.
me. But
And then Modern Combat is just the port, basically. Followed in 2006 by Battlefield 2142,
not to be
which,
mistaken with 2042.
yeah, they fell into some naming shenanigans, but seems to be relatively high scored, 8 out of 10.
PC only again, by the way.
Yeah, PC only again. I believe this is the last game that is PC only, and the rest are all same day releases on consoles. But the immediate follow up is the first Battlefield I ever played, Battlefield Bad Company. Again, it seems to be a high up game, 8.5 out of 10 in most places. So,
Yep, and an 83 on Metascore or Metacritic. I would say this is when the big traction started to hit the Battlefield franchise.
yeah, I would
This is when
say
everybody started to get into their
people
games,
started to
or
notice,
more.
which is kind of amusing because their follow up game is Mirror's Edge.
Total outlier.
Yeah, I hear good things about it, but I never played it. Followed by Battlefield Heroes, which
This I don't even know. Let me look it up real quick.
Battlefield Heroes is a 2009 third-person shooter game developed by Easy Studios and DICE. It is only on the Windows. On the Windows. It's only on Windows. So I don't have any really knowledge of this game. It was their first delve into free-to-play business models.
Yeah.
Which is the beginning of the end.
We
This is where it all started.
July 8th, 2009, Battlefield 1943 was released, which was the next installment of the Battlefield series, of course.
Yep.
And I don't remember this one either. I think this couple here is where I start to lose not interest into the Battlefield, but I forget about what these games exactly were. So let me just type it in real quick because I don't remember this one. It doesn't have a single player mode, but that's fine. It only had 3 maps actually, which is kind of surprising. Other than that, it was very similar to 42 though in any regard you could think of.
Yep. It was followed up by Battlefield Bad Company 2, which
amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Which is again followed up by 8.7 out of 10. They're back to form. I don't have much to Need for Speed Hot Pursuit was then followed up
by Battlefield Online. I don't know this one either. Apparently here, and then even after this, they have Battlefield Play for free.
Battlefield Online is a free-to-play first-person shooter. It's a remake of Battlefield 2 on Battlefield 2042's game engine. And that's literally it. That's literally all the information there is on it.
Fun. We're going right back to Battlefield Heroes, pretty much. Minus the cartoonish style, of course.
Followed up with their first Medal of Honor, which I feel like I've played Medal of Honor, but it doesn't...
I'm sorry. They made a Medal of Honor game?
EA DICE, who are known creators of the Battlefield series, were tasked by EA to develop a multiplayer mode for the game.
And then Danger Close Games did the full single-player experience.
Battlefield, the follow-up, Battlefield Play for Free.
This was a weird, wonky time for the Battlefield games.
Yeah.
And EA DICE as a company, for sure. Yeah, this got a 2.0. A fat stinking 2 on Metacritic.
So that takes us through basically the early years. And now, from this point forward, 2011 is where everyone probably knows every single game on this list for various reasons. Battlefield 3.
Crazy, man.
I know, who would have saw this coming, right?
The game that everyone will start to think, oh, that is when Battlefield started.
Yep.
Because for me, this was my first big Battlefield game. I got my 360. This was the very first game I played on it, minus another game which I can't remember at the time, but I got
it was one of the
like
Call of
Christmas
Duties
when I was younger. The one disc broke, which probably was Call of Duty game.
I think it was Call of Duty. I think it might have been Ghosts.
No, that was later.
I don't fucking
Uh,
know.
but Battlefield 3 was a massive success. Massive. I can't understate that. The user score is 7.6 with a meta score of 89, close to a 90, of course. And looking at user reviews here, it is mostly positive for sure. A lot of 10s and 9s everywhere you're looking. It was the first game to feature Battlefield game that featured a full-length story with an interesting plot point and like twists and turns, which was very well received, even with just the single player. But of course, what's a Battlefield game without the multiplayer? The multiplayer was a massive success. You could see a lot of influence from the older Battlefield games. Battlefield was highly anticipating the return of vehicles for this game, of course, being on a new engine, the Frostbite engine, which at the time looked damn beautiful and featured a lot of other modes besides single player story and multiplayer. This is when we were introduced into co-op missions, which I don't know if they returned in other Battlefield games. I don't think they have, but these were fun little side missions that you could do with just one other person, and it would actually unlock either a gun or certain attachments on guns. And there was a couple of missions that was actually pretty fun. You played against AI enemies. It varied, of course. It wasn't always the same thing, but it was like either one level could be a shooting gallery, which was pretty simple, but it gave you a free gun in multiplayer, so you do it, especially if you got a higher score. And where others could be like extract a hostage or something like that. And it was just overall very fun.
I never really played much of Battlefield 3, honestly. I played it about as much as I play any first person shooter at the time that I didn't get too invested in the multiplayer for. I beat the story, it was a good story. I would say far better than any of the Call of Duty campaigns and better than any of the previous two Battlefield campaigns that I had played, because at this point I had only played the two Bad Company games.
What Call of Duty games have you played? Because I wouldn't, on a personal level, I would not put this campaign above any of the Call of Duty campaigns. Maybe one or two, but
We got to remember here, this is a game from
2011.
2011. So at the time, the only Call of Duty games I'd probably played were like the original two or three. Because I
Oh, was it
wasn't.
classic Call of Duties?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you didn't hit the Black Ops scene or the
No, I played Black Ops a lot later, after its release.
yeah.
Actually, I didn't play. I don't think I played Black Ops until it was released in a multi pack with Black Ops 2 later in Xbox 360 life.
The last thing I want to say real quick before we move on to the next game, Battlefield 3 was the first game to have improved features like level destruction, better lighting elements throughout the maps, which made gameplay a lot more fun for sure, because then they introduced flashlights on the weapons. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it's the most game changing, but
That for me
it
though is
was
really
cool.
what made it more appealing to play than Call of Duty, was the effect you could have in the world.
Yeah, like putting C4 on a building and blowing the wall off. That was actually really cool back then. And
Yep.
definitely why I continue to play the Battlefield franchise. Again, last but not least, I believe this was the very first game with a premium membership. You paid $50 for it and you get access to all of the DLC that was to be released. I do not remember the maps off head, but I believe it was you got a few guns, a couple new maps, maybe a new game mode or two, along with,
Yep.
simple cosmetics during the time, but it was
Yep.
good for what it was. And you'll see this trend continue on in the next Battlefield games.
Yep. And we'd already touched on the critical reception. Yeah, the critical reception being very high, mostly 8.5 to 9 out of 10s. But
Yeah, people love this game.
real quick, the last note we have here is Battlefield 3 sales, 3 million pre-orders,
It's very good.
and then within the first week of release, the game sold 3 million pre-orders and an additional 5 million within the first week of availability. After 1 month, the publisher had shipped an additional 12 million copies.
So it's safe to assume it did a lot of money.
This definitely was their big
This was their
battle.
biggest success by far.
This was what really propelled them into mainstream Call of Duty, and now at this point it was just Call of Duty competitors.
Pretty much, yeah. The mid 2000s was Call of Duty dominated for sure.
Yeah. And then that takes us to Battlefield 4.
And by far my favorite Battlefield game, yes, by far.
I would say yes. This was their peak where they had really, in my opinion, figured everything out. The only complaint I ever had about it was their multiplayer system was a little janky. How they couldn't just, have a party like any other multiplayer game ever.
And this is directly off of the heels of the successful Battlefield 3, 2011 to 2013. So it was only a little while afterwards.
Yes.
And this released for PlayStation 3, PC, PlayStation 4, 360, and Xbox One. The first Battlefield to go into the next gen at that point.
But you can definitely tell based on the DLCs how rushed this game was through, because they have a lot. Mm-hmm. And I will go through them right now. We have, in no particular order, China Rising, Second Assault, Naval Strike, Dragon's Teeth, Final Stand, Night Operations, Community Operations, Legacy Operations.
Yeah, the last couple there that you listed, the Community Operations, Night Operations, and one more, were free, which was nice. That was a really nice addition,
it's just more addition. They released a lot of this game. While this game was released in 2013, they continued to release patches and DLCs through 2015.
Oh yeah, which at that we'll get to it in a bit. But
which still is unheard of to this day, that much support. There's only a handful of games that really do that.
You want to know a game that's getting supported to this very day? That's way longer than that. One of my favorite games I've been replaying, Xenoverse 2, baby. That game came out in 2016. We're in 2022, and they're dropping DLC next week.
Fucking hell, people.
Well, hey, I mean that's commitment though, because they only told us they were going to be committing to the game for 2 years.
It definitely is.
It's been past 2 years, so I mean I'm happy. But sometimes I think when they support a game too much, it might be a bad sign.
No, it's our favorite, but as a rule, I believe it's not considered the community's favorite. I believe it's an standard between 8.2 and 8.7 in ratings. It's it's not bad, but it's still good.
The problem that it has, the big problem that it had was its release. And we can say that with a lot of these Battlefield games. A lot of their releases were bad, though.
And that is because
Battlefield 3 was their first big horizon in the Battlefield franchise, minus Bad Company, was also a buggy launch. They had issues for like a month or two after the game was released. And Battlefield 4 is no exception. They were also plagued with the same issues. And I think that affected a lot of scores, like it should, because the game should be more polished when it releases for sure.
Yeah, and it agrees, because even there's a thumbnail here based on sales. During the first week of game sales, became the second best-selling game, only behind Assassin's Creed Black Flag. However, the sales were down 69% compared to Battlefield 3, which is a huge dip. And then it didn't help it at all by a few months later, after they released China Rising. China banned the game entirely.
I remember this, yep.
So that just hurt even more sales. So really they were not...
That's a whole country without sales, yeah.
Yeah, they did not handle... This game did not sell as well as Battlefield 3. But I would say...
To this day, I'd say most people love it now. But it wasn't always that way.
I would say, yeah. Anyone who's still playing and still talking about Battlefield 4 has some love and fondness for it.
And then this leads us into the next game. I believe it was 2 years later. Or no. Yes, no, 2 years later. Battlefield Hardline. Is it not?
Because EA DICE didn't develop it, so it's disqualified.
I mean, yeah, technically it is then. So what?
Versatile
Just
Games or Vertical Games or just some miscellaneous studio that I don't give a shit about.
that is so interesting. EA Dice didn't do Hardline?
No, they didn't,
Hardline wasn't a received game, by the way. They had changed it. It was more of a cops and robbers game.
which is probably why.
And
But
I mean,
no,
we may as well talk about it for a second.
no,
At
it's
least.
not EA Dice. It's banned. We don't acknowledge it. It's the redhead.
Banned!
It's the redhead stepchild.
All right. Well,
Uh,
then I do know what it does bring us next, then, I believe. Battlefield 1?
No.
Really?
you're skipping all over.
All right. Well, you go ahead. You take this lead. I'm missing something.
Okay, the next game in 2015, the beginning of what I would say is the community's disapproval for DICE. Star Wars Battlefront.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how I forgot about the Battlefront games. My mind was so focused on Battlefield. That makes sense. Battlefront 1, man. What a game.
Yeah. Now, it appears that, it's received okay now, ranging from a 6.5 to a 7, which is not good, but I mean,
We should say this game was hyped up beyond belief.
it was very
I remember. When did it come out? 2015?
2016, 2015.
2015, yeah. This was insane. And honestly, I could probably go back to this game and have fun. Even the second one that we can talk about in a little bit.
You'll talk about. I never played.
Oh, yeah, you never did. Anyways, they hyped this game up and even the second Battlefront beyond belief. And I think that's what hurt it the most. But it deserved to be hyped because this is a Star Wars franchise, at least the older Battlefronts, that wasn't made by DICE at all. But DICE decided, I guess at this point it's EA DICE, capitalize on a big franchise and really get a big money grabber. And Star Wars was definitely the route to do with its massive popularity in the world, of course.
Yeah.
And with all the hype, I think it just fell flat, and especially in the first couple months of the game, it did not do good. Well, at least in the early.
I mean, it did okay, actually.
Well, it's a big name game. It's going to, but we both know user reception when people actually played the game was mild.
Well,
Like they
there's
had
a
mixed
few.
opinions on it.
The asterisk is here is it marked the biggest launch of a video game in the Star Wars franchise, exceeding the previous record holder Force Unleashed by 117%. And it had sold 12 million copies by December of that year. So I got nothing else to say on Battlefront, do you?
I mean, other than it was a solely multiplayer game alone. It featured maps from all over the Star Wars franchise. It came pretty damn close to what people wanted. Just, a lot of things lacking, though, at the same time. There was clear maps or worlds that weren't even in the game that should have been at launch. But then, eventually, with games as a service at this point becoming a lot more popular, we'll see going forward that a lot of games do this, especially with Battlefront 2. A lot of their content is released after the game's launch and after mixed community opinions.
Okay. There's one more game, which you had already alluded to, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which is literally just a reboot of Mirror's Edge.
It's a reboot.
It's a reboot.
Oh, I thought it was a sequel.
Nope, it's a reboot.
I never played.
I haven't either. I just have it. And then
That's
that takes us into late 2016 that I am going to coin the dark period for EA DICE. Starting off, not too bad, Battlefield 1. Now, it's the only issue I have with it is it's built well. It looks good. I just don't like the game. It feels clunky because of the guns.
So 4 was my favorite, right? I believe it's yours too.
Yes.
But this is where I believe Battlefield lost a lot of fans.
This is because they
the
went.
End of the day,
This is, I believe, where everyone started. This is the game that made everyone start going back in time instead of sticking with like modern and futuristic weapons.
Yes, and this is the era because you got to realize Battlefield's been doing that. They've been sticking to either. It wasn't like that long ago for whoever could be playing the game, right? Maybe they weren't born then, but so they're not strangers to going back in time. They did it as their first couple of games.
Yes.
But they definitely got on a track of staying in that modern. When they did the switch up from Battlefield 4 and Hardline, or wait, no, sorry, we didn't talk about Battlefield Hardline. They're banned.
Yeah.
DICE didn't do it. But from Battlefield 3 and 4, for sure.
But the only notes I really have on this is it's generally what I would consider a good game. It's just not a game that I would want to play because I don't want to play a world. I just don't want to. It just doesn't strike me as interesting.
This is where I have my first couple problems with the Battlefield franchise in a minute. Again, this was 2016 of October. Released for PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. No longer supporting the last generation games.
Yes.
But
and then
Battlefield 1's biggest problem with me is the era, for sure. The guns, they don't seem to fit correctly. I believe it's the era. And I think that in the next game, they do it better overall. But it's still not my favorite because of the era.
And I will tell you.
And then I think it's just a massive downhill.
Yes.
But
so the final 4 games, well, on to the last 4 games. I'll tell you right now. I know you know 3 of them, and I know you've played 2 of them. I have played none of them.
Go on.
The first one, Star Wars Battlefront 2.
This is the biggest dark area of EA. Maybe not DICE, but it's sad that they were involved because they developed this game.
And like I had alluded to earlier when we had talked about EA's stake in the company, is there? I believe it's been put on record that this is not how DICE wanted to do the game. This is EA telling them this is what you have to do.
Yes, very heavily influenced by EA's greedy paws.
And what we're talking about here is all of the microtransactions in this game.
It got out of hand.
This is the reason why I stopped playing most of EA and DICE's games. Because I don't think I've played a game made by EA since Battlefield 4.
What's the game you should play?
The problem is the microtransactions. Now, let's start out with saying this is a $60+ game. I believe there's the $60 version, the $80 version, or the $120 version. And so you can pay all that. Basically, $60 is you have the game and you can play the game. Mm-hmm. If you want to play the game with any characters that you know, like Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker, yada, 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 you have to pay. You have to either pay additional money to unlock them, or you have to gamble with a quote-unquote loot box or loot chest or whatever the fuck they call them.
And there's no point in talking about playing to get them, because either that wasn't available for certain characters in the game, or it was so incredibly hard and time fulfilling that it made zero sense, even to someone who would play the game 24/7.
Yes. And it became, it got so bad that it became the point of questioning whether or not it was legal, because it's a game that is not catering, but to minors, and it's illegal to encourage minors to gamble, and that's all loot boxes are, is gambling. But now, granted, loot boxes for purely cosmetic things, I'm behind.
As soon as we get into territory where it starts to change the game, however, and affect players' outcomes in certain matches or whatever, this is when that becomes a problem. Cosmetics is so okay with me. As soon as you cross that line, though, I don't want nothing to do with you anymore.
Exactly. It was alluded that players that actually went through painstaking trials to figure out how much it takes to unlock a hero by just playing. And it was estimated 35 to 50 hours of grinding to unlock one character. And
that makes me mad.
And EA's business practices, in my opinion, tanked the game all the way down to an average of a 6.5 rating.
Okay, now I have one question. I know this tanked somebody's stock. Was it EA or was it Disney? Or was it both?
I'm going to guess EA.
EA got hit. Yeah, I know they did. I don't know if Disney lost
Disney
stock.
is so
Maybe I'm
rich they
carrying them.
probably don't care.
Yeah, if they got hit, it doesn't matter to them. But I know EA got bombshelled
Yeah,
with
EA
loss of revenue,
EA
and
was in the
their
news for a
stock
long time
shares went
about
down
that.
so much.
EA was in the news for a long time with that, for that, and the
A
follow-up
good 6
game.
months, yes.
The follow-up game also landed them back in the news, Battlefield 5. But this one was for different reasons.
Battlefield 5 released November 20th of 2018. PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One.
Yeah. And at this
Same
point,
things with the upfronts, however.
after Battlefield 1, I had no intention to play Battlefield 5. I know that they switched like the whole formula, and now after this game it's different. I know absolutely nothing about it. It got down to about an 8 out of 10, and I do recall it was something to do with one of the story missions. I believe they were leading you to believe something was true when it wasn't, or they were misrepresenting history.
Oh my god, yes.
Yes.
Oh shit, hold on.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
See if you can look.
There was a certain sub-story, because the way Battlefield 5 worked was Battlefield 1 did it completely different, and they were okay with it. Anyways, what happened here is there was a sub-story in Battlefield 5 where I believe they cut the story up to like, this is an arc for this character with this country and everything. And in this certain chapter of the story or whatever, this storyline, I believe it was something to do about Polish people. I don't know. I'm very vague with this, and I don't remember it that well. But they got everything wrong, and it offended so many people. This is a totally separate point, but in Battlefield 5, many fans took issue with DICE's inclusion of women soldiers in their World War II game. And it got the tune of over 300,000 dislikes on the Battlefield 5's reveal trailer after its worldwide premiere. So safe to say people weren't happy with that, because it wasn't realistic. Sure, there probably was a woman or two somewhere. It just wasn't a thing, right? No one talks like, oh, women went to war. No,
Well, I believe,
especially not in World War II.
I believe the specific issues that I recall were they were making up situations and playing them off as true when there were actual stories of women soldiers in World War II.
And one of these
Because I
story arcs,
believe
it had a woman soldier in it.
I don't remember what it was, but I do remember that there was controversy around this game for a long time.
It's hard to find. Yes, I do know in one of these storylines, because that's how Battlefield 5 and 1 did it. They split up their story into chapters. Like, oh, chapter 1 is this guy in France fighting through like his war, and then we go over to Russia or whatever. That's how they split it up. But I believe there was a female soldier, supposedly, that did all this espionage in Russia or Poland. It was one of these weird countries during the war. The whole story arc for this one character in that game, it didn't happen. Like, this did not happen in World War II at all. And so that's why a lot of people were pissed. And not to mention that in the story arc, it was a woman soldier. As far as the actual game, it's not bad. In fact, it got a lot better from 1, in my personal opinion. Whereas I gave Battlefield 1 like a 3 out of 10. I did not like the game. I played the beta of that game, which was fun. Some maps were okay. Again, it comes down to gunplay, though. It didn't work in 1. 2, Battlefield 5, it got a lot better. World War II is much more of a better era, because you're bringing in more automatic weapons, more interesting weapons, more iconic weapons, right? We're looking here on Metacritic right now, and it's still pretty much like Battlefield 1 at an 8 out of 10, mostly, maybe 7s every now and again. Minus the controversy, the game is actually decent right now.
Their follow-up is a game that I'm not even sure if you know about, because I didn't know about it until I was looking through the list. A game called Ultra Core.
Heard of it. I don't know if I played it.
I guarantee you I haven't, because Ultra Core is a run-and-gun 2D shooter released for the PS4, PS Vita, Nintendo Switch.
3 things came up on Metacritic. There is 0 user reviews on this game.
Yeah, like I said,
the Metacritics are here, and its Metascore is 63. I don't know anything about this game.
I don't recall it at all.
We'll just skip by this one. Sorry.
I know the only thing I know about it, I should say, is it was a game that was originally developed and maybe released for the Genesis and Amiga, and then it was remastered or even released. I can't seem to find a solid answer just last year.
Yeah,
but
I don't know anything. I have no room to
I got
talk
nothing.
here.
I got nothing. Basically, but the surprising part about this is Battlefield 5 came out in 2018. DICE took a long time off.
Yeah.
Their next release is in 2021. 3 years later, Battlefield 2042. Which
You
again,
have a lot to say about the release. Again, surpriser.
Go for it. I got nothing.
Surprisingly. In Battlefield 2042, where do we start? They took out the single player modes that people actually did like in the last iterations of the Battlefield franchise.
Which is a
They took them out.
common thing in multiplayer shooters of the day.
Yeah, I mean back then, sure, they were trying to claim that they're just going back to their roots, as in no story. But I'm sorry, when it becomes part of your game, especially 3 and 4 had good stories. Even actually, Bad Company was even better in the mid 2000s. They were amazing. And when you just take it out and gut it all of a sudden.
Well, even if that was the case, that's a bad excuse.
It is, yes. And so, but they're like, oh, we've always been multiplayer only. It's like, well, you were, but whatever. So they gutted no single player content at all for this game. You can play single player in a multiplayer game. I don't know how to explain that one.
But yeah, the increasing diminishing of single player campaigns and shooters is becoming a real issue lately. I mean, I think it started back when Siege and Overwatch came out with no single player campaign whatsoever. And then Call of Duty started doing it a little here and there. And now it's like every shooter that comes out has no campaign.
Yeah, they're finding a bad cycle right now, and I want them to break that. Because, I mean, we'll go off track for a second here. I remember hearing, well, maybe it was after Battlefront 2, when Jedi Fallen Order was released, EA had this theory that single-player games aren't good, and that, I don't know if it was a tweet or anything, I know it's out there somewhere, but they got so much backlash for saying that. And it's like, I'm sorry, vast majority of my favorite video games are single player by heart. They have no multiplayer aspects whatsoever. And if they do, they are not the star of the show at all. And so when EA said something along those lines of single player games not being all that, they got so much hate, and they thoroughly deserved every minute of that one. Let's get back to Battlefield 2042 on topic. EA DICE. EA at this point, 2021, last year, I'm sorry, by that point, DICE is no more. It's an EA subsidiary. 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Whoever was at DICE making those early games, even that Shrek game, isn't there anymore. Just not at all. And that's sad, because I think DICE made good shit back then. But 2042, man, shitty launch. Not a surprise, though. Battlefield 3 and 4 was bad. Battlefield 1 wasn't the best. Terrible glitches at launch. Terrible microtransactions. I don't have anything good to say about this game, and I did play it. This was one of the games I'm like, okay, maybe it is a return to form. It's modern again, which is, that caught my eye. I think we're moving out of this shitty era of World War II, which was okay, but it wasn't my particular taste at all. And we went back to modern, and I'm like, it's still not doing it. I don't know. It's like they lost their way, and I feel bad for DICE. I do. Because this game got so much hate. It was ridiculed everywhere for the first like 3 to 4 months it was out. No content still for the game. We're in 2022 now, and it's just not at all. It's not looking promising for the game is all I really got to say at this point.
No, and I do know just through basically a couple of news stories that have popped up that they've had a few controversies about names of things in the game. I don't exactly know.
Again, but this Battlefield franchise from DICE or EA at this point.
Yeah.
I hate saying EA.
It's no longer DICE, but
it's
EA.
It sucks. It's not a good situation for the Battlefield franchise or any game that DICE is in charge of anymore. It's just not. I'm sorry.
No,
we have to come to grips with some of the games we held on pedestals back then aren't on that pedestal anymore. They've fallen off the pedestal. Someone pushed them off. Or they give them money and they shut them out. or shunned out, not shot out. That sucks. We could talk about other video game companies that were the same way. They started off amazing. They're kind of shit now. We get to like BioWare. They had a couple hit series, good single games. That was it. They're falling off now. Hopefully they'll get better again, but it's the same thing with EA. Or well, actually no, BioWare is a subsidiary of EA actually. But these games from these companies that are either getting bought out or pushed to the side in terms of players not liking their games or bad reviews, whatever it could be. Maybe they're just not making the content that other gamers and players want. You know, it's a sad thing for these companies all around, and DICE is no exception. I think Battlefield is it's a series I hold near and dear, but it is dying and I feel bad. Do we have any last words?
No, the only thing I've got is EA has this thing that all they care about is making the most money they can. They don't care about the content they produce, which I shouldn't just say EA is. It's a case like that in a lot of corporations and businesses. But it's like,
Yeah.
it's just pure greed. You have so much money. You don't need to milk the people that buy your games for more. Stop doing it. Stop setting this example for other studios.
Like I said, these companies that were high up on these pedestals, they got greedy. They took money from other companies that were bigger than them. EA's being the most problematic one, I could say. And I think that's why we talked about DICE specifically. EA ruined them. And they did it to BioWare. And they're just not the only ones. There's others out there that got destroyed by this greedy system of corporate America. But we're not going to get political about it. It's just shitty for gamers, which is what we are by heart.
It is what it is.
At least we have the gems that were put out before they got insanely greedy.
Before EA.
At least we have Shrek 1.
That's right.
Or 2001. Which still blows my mind it sold that much, by the way, for that Xbox. Okay. When you said the Medal of Honor game,
Medal of Honor multiplayer, yeah.
it wasn't the first Medal of Honor game. We should clear that up at the end here. It was a revitalization of the franchise for Medal of Honor. EA DICE picked it up, and it looked very promising. I mean, it's got a 7 out of 10 on Steam. And I remember I really wanted to play this game, and I think at some point I still want to get it and just see. It came out in 2010. It's just a multiplayer video game. I think it tried to be the next Call of Duty game. I think this game just was underdeveloped. I don't think it had any corporate greed in it. Maybe it had a little, of course. It's 2010. That's when they started a little.
It is EA.
But it wasn't as big as it was. But yeah, that was also a DICE game, and it's not the worst. It could have been a better game, I think, if it had more time in the oven. I'll just because it looked promising. Every single EA DICE game, that was all of them. We talked about it. Every game. Of course, there was some that we do not know. A lot of the pinball ones in the early 90s, you know.
I'm sure they were just as great as pinball can be.
At the end of the day, final thoughts. EA DICE is good. Or, no, the opposite. EA DICE is bad. And like I said, it's because EA gets their dirty hands all over these smaller companies that they buy out, and they just decide to make decisions that those companies necessarily don't want to make. Case in point, Battlefront 2. And then they learned a valuable lesson that day, or that year, I should say. Battlefront 2 being by far, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, by far the worst mistake EA has ever made, with those microtransactions ruining a Disney product. I'm sure Disney wasn't happy with them.
Probably not, because they didn't make the follow-up, so they probably weren't that thrilled.
Yeah. So that's all I really have to say. DICE was decent before EA got too greedy. That's all.